behind the scenes with CPWD's Board of Directors. Meet the board members.
My name is Ruth Arnold, and I've been on the Board of Directors since the founding of the agency in 1977, I think. So I haven't even counted up how many years that is, but it's a very long time.
Wonderful.
So I was at the time of the founding of the agency, or before the founding of the agency, I was working for the Mental Health Center in Boulder, which was called Mental Health Center of Boulder County Incorporated at the time. They're now Mental Health Partners. And we were seeing many people with disabilities other than mental health issues coming to us for services because there was no place for other disabilities. So a group of us got together in a work group to come up with what kind of agency could we create that could fill the needs of the people who weren't getting services, either from mental health, which was an established entity at that point, or developmental disabilities. And we realized there were many other types of disability configurations, and they had no place to go. So we wanted to create something, at least to start filling in the gaps. So Homer Page, I would say, was sort of the impetus, and Judy Dixon we hired as the first executive director for the center. And Judy and Homer had worked together at the University of Colorado Disabled Student Center.
My name's Deborah Conley, and I'm a board member for CPWD, and I am currently about to start my 12th year as a board of directors member. Well, I started now it's an organization, and it's called Lending Site, and I started guiding visually impaired athletes in running and triathlon events, and I grew guides, and eventually I moved into the development of tethers for the sport. Tethers are what link the visually impaired person to the guide.
Okay.
And they're needed in track and field and in road races and in swimming when you're doing open water swims.
My name is Dale Carr. I'm on the board for CPWD. I first joined the board in 1991, so it's been 30 years about. I took a couple of years off during and then rejoined the board. Well, I have a disability myself. I'm an amputee and walk with an artificial leg. And that was around the time that the ADA was being passed and implemented. And I just wanted to connect with the disability community and find a way to give something back to the community. So this was one way I did it. The other thing I did was start volunteering to teach skiing up at the National Sports Center for the Disabled. And I did that for 20 some years. So those were my two main disability-related activities. I thoroughly enjoyed them both.
My name is Michael Stone. I have the privilege of being on the board of directors.
How long have you been on the board of directors?
3 years, I believe.
Nice.
And I should know that, but yeah. I'm blind, and I'm very in the spirit of being humbled. I consider myself to be privileged with disability, and yet I know how hard it is for me. And anytime there's an organization that is in support of those with disabilities, I want to do my part to the best of my ability.
My name is Sylvan. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them, and I am on the board of directors at CPWD.
Hi, my name is Julie Aird, and I'm a member, president of the board of directors of CPWD. I have been on the board for 3 years, president since March of this year. I've worked with Centers for Independent Living since my early 20s. Being on the board for me is important because I've lived experiences. I'm a person with disabilities, and I've lived through a lot of different experiences that now that I am advocating for change from what was to now.
My name's Jason Konzak. I've been a member of the CPWD Board of Directors for a little over 5 years now. I'm currently a board treasurer, but I've had a couple different roles over the years. It was kind of a new opportunity, and it was interesting because I had gone through some health challenges a while back, and I spent some time not having my mobility. And so I went from not being able to walk to being in a wheelchair to getting around with a walker and then a cane. And I'd never really thought before about accessibility, about disability, about some of about just health and life and the various challenges that we all face. And so it was an experience that provided a kind of a different perspective for me, and kind of just opened my eyes a bit. And through the combination of that experience and then getting to meet so many great people here is really what's kind of broadened my awareness to many consumers that we serve and various folks, each working through their own unique circumstances.
What are you most proud of about CPWD?
I think they've gone well beyond what we envisioned at the beginning. We were trying to just fill in gaps and do a limited number of services, and it turned into an entire independent living center, which wasn't even on the horizon as a thing back then. But it was able to move into that and move into a consumer-run organization, which was also very cutting edge and was not at all how human services were done back then. So that's been very exciting and kept my passion going over the years.
I think what's really impressive about CPWD is that it's not, from someone who, if you're in the community, I think you're aware of this, but for folks who are not, is really just the independent living philosophy and mindset. And so I think a lot of times we think about services, right? And we think about, people come and they need some sort of assistance, they need some sort of service, and it's just, assistance or help or some program. And I think what's lost in that sometimes is understanding independence itself and the philosophy of being a center for independent living, and really ensuring that consumers have control and choice, and are being treated with respect and dignity, and being able to, get assistance and helping to level the playing field where there are, systemic biases or challenges that are just not, appropriately inclusive.
I really appreciate the philosophy of the Centers for Independent Living. I appreciate the fact that it is primarily run by people with disabilities, because that's really important. Again, people with developmental disabilities, including autism, have been really, I don't know if instrumental is even the right word, or the self-advocacy movement within disability rights activism is something that came out of developmentally disabled people's communities, essentially. people who are autistic or otherwise were considered somehow mentally less fit or whatever, diagnosed with intellectual disability or things like that, essentially started these movements of nothing about us without us. And I think that's really important.
Independence is becoming more and more challenging. One might think with all of the technology and everything that we have, that it's easier to be independent these days, but it's much to the contrary. As the world is becoming, it's moving further and further away from independence. And when there's an organization such as CPWD that is spending all of its time and resources in support of allowing people to gain independence, it's just absolutely spectacular. Now, couple that with having some of the most amazing staff that are kind, have empathy in every which way you can possibly use that word, and are doing so much for the sole purpose of helping people feel independent.
Really appreciate how the center is managed. The leadership is excellent. The advocacy is top-notch. I believe in what the staff is doing, what we're doing together to make a difference for the lives of people with disabilities.
What changes have you seen over the years?
I think culturally there were very siloed groups. There were people with visual impairment, there were people with hearing impairment, and they kind of knew each other, but they didn't intermingle. So the whole concept of cross disability didn't really exist. And different disabilities would kind of rise to the top as an unmet need over time, sometimes because, for example, brain injury became a big issue when the medical community was able to keep people alive from injuries that they otherwise didn't survive. So suddenly there was this large group of people who needed services, who were living and wanted to live independently and needed a different kind of service configuration. And over time, more and more people who had cross disability, and I don't know why that was more, maybe it's that they recognized that they had different kinds of disabilities and that you didn't just have to fit into one silo or another. So, it's shifted over the years. It's very interesting.
How do you want to see CPWD grow?
I would like to see us develop programs where people with disabilities often have coexisting disabilities, and the coexisting disability often isn't the disability that's most serviced. For example, I have a disability myself, which is I have post-traumatic stress disorder. And currently, there's not mental health services in our center, and we don't actually deal with a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder people seeking services. But people who are visually impaired, there's a lot of depression, and it depends on how you became visually impaired, if that was an accident, and really any type of limb impairment. If there was an accident involved, it's not just dealing with the limb impairment and the new things that are happening to your body and how you're moving, but the mental aspects that come along with that. And we have some peer groups that are developing, but I would like to see more of that and more education around that.
I hope during the coming years we become even more of a presence nationally in the independent living movement. One thing I'd really love to see is some of the young people that we work with move toward involvement in politics, state or national politics. We now have a state representative who's a person who uses a wheelchair. And this last legislative session was wonderful in terms of the number of disability-related bills that were presented to the legislature, and some very important ones that were adopted. So I would like to see a lot more of that.
Because I don't believe in growth for the sake of growth. I believe in meeting needs and just maintaining that pulse and of what need is. And that's where it is. So whether or not, for example, the state of Colorado has released much in the way of new legislation in support of disabilities. It's incredible, to the point where they have a whole task force that is going to, and I have the privilege of sitting on that task force. And that's going to be geared towards that. I think that the Centers for Independent Living, which are few and far between, of which CPWD is one, that we are kind of almost one step ahead of that. And that's where I definitely would like to be. So definitely in the spirit of advocating.
I've been really excited to hear different groups of consumers stand up for what they want and not see what we consider as a disability to be defining them, and not seeing it necessarily as something to be fixed, but as something that is just a part of who they are, and wanting recognition from society, valuing that, as opposed to treating it or accommodating it or fixing it or whatever. And I just think that's just really exciting. So seeing that self-empowerment and what it does to shift the need for services.